Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Parental responsibility. What is it? What does it mean? Does it matter if you haven't got orders? What happens while you're trying to get orders? And what does it mean after you get orders? Today, we're going to be talking about this word. I'm going to call it a buzzword at the moment, Mum, called parental responsibility. But welcome, Mum. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Laura. Hello, everyone. And Laura, yes, it's a new definition, so to speak, of parental responsibility. It's similar to the old one, but the court has made new orders as of May.
So this is very fresh. But before we get into that, and we're going to talk all about it, the changes, what it means, and some examples. But before we get into that and talk about our divorce personality prism, the, manipulative, controlling, high conflict, amicable, and avoidant, and how it fits in with this parental responsibility situation. But before we do, I want to read out a review. We get many lovely reviews, Mum, as you know, from our lovely listeners. But Mum, I wanted to choose one lucky person who's written us a review, and we're choosing someone today from Spotify reviews. You can jump on there and tell us what you think about the episode. And today's review is from a lady. She only did it 13 hours ago. And her first name is Donna. And I'm just going to say Donna M. So if you would like to email us at thedivorcecourspodcast@gmail.com, we can arrange a free call with you and Mum. And if you would like to have a chat with my lovely Mum, you can also write us a review on Apple or Spotify, and we will choose someone every couple of weeks or so to get that free call. And today's review says, great episode with helpful insights on post-separation abuse. This podcast and the course are lifesavers. Cannot recommend highly enough. Thank you, Laura and Lynn, our angels. So that's a lovely message from Donna. And thank you, Donna. And to everybody who's written in reviews this week, it just makes our day, doesn't it, Mum? Because we hear such horrible stories, but then we hear these lovely people that we're helping, and it makes it worth our while. And it makes it's the reason we do it, isn't it, Mum?
It is. And because we're hearing your stories as you start out, and we're hearing the stories of people who are either nearly through it or completely through it, and we get their feedback, we know that you are on the right track, and you should know that you're on the right track, and you will get to the end.
So thank you for that. Email us in, and if you'd like to get a chat with Mum, don't forget to leave us a review. That would be amazing, and it will help us get to other people. So let's get into talking about parental responsibility. So, Mum, parental responsibility, what is it?
It's the things that you are supposed to do or have to do in caring for a child as a parent.
So why is it such a big deal, and why are people throwing this word around like crazy at the moment? And why, when someone goes to a lawyer or they're talking about orders, is this word bandied around? Why is it so important?
Well, it's one of the orders that a court can make about a child, who has that parental responsibility. And particularly since the 6th of May, it's really changed, Laura. So you used to hear people talk about equal shared parental responsibility, ESPR, some people used to call it. And that meant that each of you had to look after the child, make all the decisions together, consult, and keep going until you got an agreement, essentially. And then if they didn't get an agreement, you would have to go to court. So equal shared parental responsibility was kind of a presumption under the Act before it changed. And so many people have that. And sole parental responsibility has always been around, and that was a rare thing to be given. Now this new legislation has abolished equal shared parental responsibility, and it's now joint parental responsibility. So it just means which of you makes which decisions about which kids.
So what's the difference between joint and equal? It sounds to me the same.
No, it's different. So it's tricky to explain, Laura, so you might have to bear with me, guys. But so when you are together and you have a baby and you're both on the birth certificate or whatever, you each can do anything that needs to be done for the baby without the other person's say-so, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why one person will often take them for their vaccines and another one can take them overseas. That is joint parental responsibility. And that is what the child usually is born into. Now, the court then started to break up that joint parental responsibility. So each of you in equal shared parental responsibility had the power to make decisions, but you had to consult and you weren't allowed to just go and make a decision on your own.
Mm.
Now, that was the situation from 2006. And guess what? They've abolished equal shared parental responsibility now. And
as of the 6th of May?
Yeah, as of the 6th of May, 2024. And you either have the parental responsibility that your child had all the time, which is each of you can do anything with the child, or the court is still awarding sole parental responsibility.
Okay. And sole parental responsibility, what does that mean?
It means you can make all of the decisions about a child. They're major decisions. We'll talk about that later, won't we? The dividing up between major and... Yeah, but you can make all of the decisions about the child. And although you should try to consult with the other person, you don't need to reach agreement to do stuff with the kids.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at this then in regards to, say, to our listeners at the moment, they just separated. They haven't even been to a lawyer, or they've been to a lawyer, but they're not anywhere near having orders yet. And then we'll look at it for someone who's got orders, and then we'll look at for people who are about to get orders, and then we'll look at for people who are way down the track.
Okay, so that sounds sensible.
So people who don't have orders, they haven't seen a lawyer, what's the rules with this responsibility?
It's the same as when the baby was born. Okay. So you both
can do anything?
Yeah, each of you can do everything or anything with the child that you are required to do or wish to do, I guess.
So, but then once you get a parenting plan, can people put the parental responsibility in a parenting plan?
You can, but you can just be silent on it as well.
Okay.
Because you don't have to change anything to get joint parental responsibility, because that's how things are whether you go to court or not. So really the only specific order will probably be sole parental responsibility for particular things. Because I think that's what the court's going to do. I think that where you and the other parent can't agree, and you each have parental responsibility because you've got joint, if anyone goes to the court I think is going to deal with it by saying, oh, all right, then you can't agree. This parent has sole parental responsibility for education. And off you go. So they're going to start picking it off bit at a time if you don't agree.
So the example you've just given, people have just split up and then all of a sudden their exes said, oh, no, I don't want them to go to that private school. I don't want to pay for that. So I want them to go to a state school now. And there's a big fight and the kids are meant to be going to school next year. So if they end up in front of a judge, the judge isn't going to choose the school usually?
No. Actually, it's interesting that happens so often. Usually for the new year, and there's a frantic scrabble to get a court order. And the court has said quite clearly in the past that they're not about saying this school A is better than school B or anything like that. So they're going to listen to the competing proposals of the parents and just choose a parent to make the decision. I think that's where it's going.
So they'll say you get sole parental responsibility for education, but not for everything else.
They may not put it for everything else. Whatever it is the dispute's over, they're going to pick one of you. And I think the risk is for anyone who's thinking, well, I'll go to court, is that you don't know whether the court will choose your option or the other person's option and impose it on you. And so I think that there's an incentive there for people to try and talk it out.
What other examples have you seen of these kind of responsibilities that have had to be divvied up, or you think now because of the new changes are going to be divvied up?
I had a terrible case once in a country town where the father enrolled the kids at one school and the mother enrolled the kids at another school closer to her house, and the children were doing week about at different schools until we got to before the judge in about March. Neither parent would back down. you'd have expected someone to cave in and not want to wish that on the children, but it was just terrible.
Other than education, what other parental responsibility types are there?
There can be medical. Well, I remember an awful fight between people years ago where they were in dispute over a little girl's diabetes medication and who was going to be the one who had control of the app and who was going to have the prescriptions and who was going to pick up. And it was just dreadful. And the court may well have in that case said, look, to stop that negatively impacting the child's care, and it was, then they should have, I think now the court would just choose one and say, off you go. So it's important to know that until May this year, there was a presumption of equal shared parental responsibility, so that you had to decide together or else, right? And the other one, presumption was that if you had equal shared parental responsibility, then the court had to consider equal time. So I think the best answer to you when you're saying, why now? What's parental responsibility so important? It's because it used to be a determinator of the time that the kids would be likely to spend. Equal shared parental responsibility usually led to 50-50 shared care.
So that gets me to my next question, because I know a lot of people get this confused. There's responsibility and you hear the word bandied around as well, sole custody. Sole responsibility, sole custody. And they're two different things, aren't they?
They are.
Responsibility is decision-making and custody is
where the kids live, where the kids sleep, where the kids,
Right. So don't get them mixed up.
Yeah, and there's no custody words in the new legislation.
What are the new words?
Lives with.
Okay.
We've kept with lives with. But what the court's taken out is that presumption that the child will be in shared care 50-50.
So for people that are just starting to figure out what's going on, in the old days, you would have to, if you were going to make a big decision, you would have to get the other parent to agree, which would be all well and good in an amicable divorce, but perhaps not so good in a high conflict or manipulative, controlling, or even avoidant. If you're trying to get them to agree what school, that would be really hard. So you're saying now the new laws for Australia anyway is that Australia and everywhere except for WA de facto, you don't have to have the other person's permission to make decisions.
That's right.
Wow. That's
Neither
huge.
of you has to if there aren't any particular orders.
So that's going to take away a lot of that post-separation abuse.
I think it is, because people used to bring contraventions. I remember a case where someone signed up the child to the school that his older brother was going to, put his name down, thought that was going to be fine. Her ex-husband took her to court on a contravention for signing the child up to a school without consulting him. And so that was, it was absolute evidence and weapons for equal shared parental responsibility. And I reckon, Laura, a whole industry grew up about that. All of this, what I call nonsense, parenting coordinators, they were just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole because people couldn't agree. And so they wanted to be all, like the orders that they have, their precedent orders, appoints them judge and jury of your children, So I think the court in the new orders haven't mentioned sending people to parenting coordinators. There's been legislation. There's been a case now where they've said that giving coordinators that control is like giving away the parents' power and the law's power. But anyway, so I think it just didn't work before.
Yeah. All right. So big asterisks under that. Mum does not agree with parenting coordinators. Turns out is it the High Court or the Appeal Court?
Well, the government and the full court.
The government and the full court also don't seem to like them either. So we do have people asking questions about parenting coordinators all the time. And it is an episode that we have done called Why Your Narcissistic Ex Might Want to Have a Parenting Coordinator. And you should definitely listen to that episode before you agree. And if you've agreed in a parenting plan, it's not legally binding, so you can change your mind on that, can't you, Mum?
You can. Parenting plans are just parenting plans. And now there's this full court authority to say that that's not an appropriate use of them.
Okay, good. All right. So let's get back to what it is, what it does. So you said there's different, so you can have different types. So you can go to court and you can ask for being in charge of making all the decisions when it comes to medical. And does that take the power away from the other parent of being able to make that decision?
Yes.
What's the difference between responsibility and day-to-day issues? How do people know? So if they've got if they're going for sole responsibility or they're given sole responsibility, what decisions can the other parent make when they have their children?
The court says in 61 DAB of the legislation.
That is a ridiculous number, by the way. That's
61 capital DABs.
Isn't that what kids used to do? Like dabbing?
Yeah, dabbing.
It's a 61 dab.
You're showing your age too. This is what it says. Section 61 DAB, no need to consult on issues that are not major long-term issues. And of course, then you say, well, what are major long-term issues? And then it goes on to explain it. If a child is spending time with a person at a particular time under a parenting order, the order is taken to not require the person to consult a person who has, oh my gosh, and that are not, okay, I'm going to have to paraphrase it.
Okay, we're going to put it in the show notes because the actual wording is terrible.
Yes,
but
it
Mum,
is.
Can you paraphrase 61 DAB for us, please?
Okay.
Of the Family Law Act.
So these are the things that are not major long-term issues, according to 61 DAB. You don't have to consult about what the child eats or wears because these aren't long-term issues. So while they're in your care or the care of the other person, those little decisions can be made by that person without consulting. And I think sometimes we lost sight of how many decisions are still to the person who's got them during the day. Now, the long-term issues, the major long-term issues, changing your names, I don't know, maybe going overseas or big medical issues, then those might need to be consulting.
Now, last week, we were talking about the Purple Book and the post-separation abuse that can occur. And you've just said day-to-day issues like what the child wears, what your child eats, what your child watches on TV. All of those things are the kind of things that people write into us and say, my ex wrote this big, long complaint letter about little Johnny was wearing the wrong coloured shoes or little Jilly said she watched Harry Potter or, all this kind of stuff. And they go at them. And we've talked about word salad letters and dealing with narcissists and the manipulative controlling type. They just want to continue to reach into your world and continue to control everything. So is this pretty much just saying, bugger off?
Yes.
I don't have to 61 dab.
Listeners, you should see Laura's doing the dab.
Look, my kids were primary school kids when they were dabbing. I know how to dab. So, Mum, every time any of our listeners get a letter that's complaining about what you fed them or what they want, well, I don't know.
You can just cut and paste.
61 dab.
Cut and paste.
61 dab. Sorry, cut and paste it. So we're going to put that in the show notes so that you can cut and paste it from the Family Law Act.
Because they just have it. Note, this will mean that the person with whom the child's spending time will usually not need to consult on decisions such as what they eat or wear. So they've given an example. And yes, you just cut and paste that and send it back to them. You get your head and your control out of my household.
That's going to relieve so many people who have a manipulative, controlling or narcissistic type. Or even high conflict. You can just go, sorry, it was in my time. You can live with it.
And sometimes too, if you've got say you've got rules about devices and the other householder has completely different rules, sometimes people think their plan is the best for the children and they would like when they're over there to follow the same rules, but you can't do that. And kids are pretty good at two different sets of rules, two different sets of environment because they go from home to school and school to home and the rules are different there. So you just paddle your own canoe. And I think, guys, our listeners need to educate anyone who is attempting this coercive control and sticky beaking into none of their business. And there's no harm at all in just cut and paste section 61 dab and send it to them.
And you know what, Mum? I just looked up how many decisions an average adult makes in a day, 33,000 to 35,000 a day. That's according to Harvard Business Review website. That's a lot of decisions that you don't have to make without their 2 cents worth in.
And I wonder if those decision numbers go up exponentially depending on how many kids you've got. So,
Yes,
Laura, do you feel like you're making 120,000 decisions a day?
But doesn't that take a load off everybody's
Yeah.
shoulders to just know, oh gosh, I could go breathing room.
Yes.
If you've got an ex who's manipulative, controlling, or high conflict and they want to fight about the color of the sky, you can do whatever you like. But in saying that, remembering if you're not at court yet or you haven't gone to court yet, they are going to look at whether or not you're trying to undermine the other parent. So that is something we talked about in the Purple Book the other day. So when it comes to day-to-day decisions, it is good to try and continue parenting the way you were parenting. And if you had device rules or certain things, you don't want to go drastically changing it just to get at the other parent, because that's going to come out in court and it's going to look bad.
Yeah, same with anyone who's on a special diet for health. You'd be foolish to do the wrong thing by the child, because the best interests of the child are paramount, and that is the overriding golden words of this whole section about children.
Okay. So, Mum, so those people that haven't got to court, they can now relax a little bit and go, you know what? I can actually make these decisions. I don't need to rely on my ex. And if you're amicable, great. Keep parenting, co-parenting the way that you are. Make the decisions together. Do it. What's the wording that the court says exactly? You've got to try and...
What they say is if a parenting order provides for joint decision-making about major long-term issues, then each of you, except if it's not safe to do so, the order is taken to require you to consult each other person in relation to the decision and make a genuine effort to come to a joint decision. But it says, to avoid doubt, this section does not require any other person to establish before acting on a decision about child communicating with one of those parents that the decision was made jointly. No.
All right, we'll put that in the show notes. Explain that to us in normal speak.
Okay, it's capital, it's 61 DAA. So da, just in front of dad. Yeah.
It's da.
And so the golden bit about that, there's 2 golden bits in 61 DAA. The first one is that although you're required to consult each other, you have to make a genuine effort to come to a joint decision. There is no requirement that you come to a joint decision, right? You just do your best. And then it's also in number 2, that to avoid doubt section. This is really powerful. It says that any other person, before acting on a decision about, so say you want to take your child to a psychologist, right? And you've got an order that says joint parental responsibility, or you don't have an order. And you go to a psychologist and say, I want to enroll little Jimmy at your clinic. They don't need to be shown any evidence that the other person agrees. They don't have to inquire about it. They can't be held legally responsible. And so it says that any other person can just act on a decision that was communicated by one of those persons, and they don't have to look and make sure you both agreed. And I think that's another little avenue of post-separation abuse.
I've heard of people where they've enrolled their kids in things, or they've signed them up for medical things, or they've gone somewhere else for something, and then the other person's rung them up and said, I don't give permission, and please take them off it. So that's tricky, and it could backfire. But Mum, you said that you have to show that you did your best to negotiate. How should our listeners do their best to negotiate? Like, I know it doesn't say it in the act, but what would you expect it shows a reasonable attempt at negotiating? Is it just talking to them on the phone for one discussion, or should they be writing it in a letter? Like, how much negotiating is reasonable?
There's no punishment that I can see for not making a genuine effort. So I think and it doesn't have to be a mediator. You have to maybe write some emails saying, this is what I reckon, what do you think? And these are my reasons, what do you think? And then if it doesn't work, you're going, well, I'm doing it anyway. And then you've got those emails. I think my key takeaway is two things.
You know you could find us on Instagram, Facebook and TikTok. We're there waiting for you right now. If you want to get more out of the Divorce Course, all you have to do is go to the Divorce Course podcast at Facebook or TikTok, or the Divorce Course on Instagram. There we share bite-sized pieces of information and bite-sized inspiration and motivation to help you through this difficult time. Come and join our community and let us know you've joined. We'd love to see you there.
I think my key takeaway is, one, put it always in writing. Yes. And two, you don't always have to go through mediation, but you can try mediate.
It's really important though, like you're saying, there's no real consequences for it. But I think, like you always say, if you want to go to court, you always be the top kid in the class. You have your clean shoes, your nose is clean, or whatever that term means. Actually, I think it's a right reference.
It's clean hands.
Clean hands, not nose.
Equity, you can't go to an equity court without clean hands. So you go,
clean hands.
Your Honour, look, I did. I brushed under my nails. I did everything right. They didn't.
Yeah. So you've got to have some sort of, here I tried to negotiate, here's some examples. But if you've got a high conflict person, they're going to want to just fight everything, and it's going to get in the way of parenting.
Yep. Well, of course, this need to discuss things is only if you've got an order for joint decision making. Right. If you don't have an order for joint decision making, then each of you has the power that you had when you were together.
If you don't have an order at all, but you are separated, you're saying you can just do whatever you want. You don't
Each parent can do, what they should do.
But you should negotiate. It's a good idea to negotiate.
Yes. So this is about someone who's got the order. But if you haven't got an order, you should try to negotiate as you would if you were together, you know. But if that isn't working, then the alternative is first go to mediation, get your 60I certificate, try and sort it out. If not, you may have to go to court and ask the court to decide on which parent gets to make that decision or all decisions, but, you know, for that sort of thing. And the court will then look at how reasonable you've been and how unreasonable or reasonable they've been. And they're going to choose the person who's been the most reasonable. So those clean hands, clean shoes, clean teeth, all of those, you need to be the best and cleanest and most upstanding person when you go to court.
Because they're going to have to choose one of you.
Yep.
I used to be a teacher, and if I had to choose a kid to go and take the note to someone, I was going to choose the kid that had either done all their work or, you know, I could really trust them because they do the right thing. You're not going to choose the other kid. So I guess it's the same when they're making a judgment. They've got to explain why. So, Mum, how often do you think people are going to go to court now? And how often do you think the court's going to do this sole responsibility for certain things? How is this going to become a big thing, or we've got to wait and see?
Well, the last one lasted for 17 years and this government has changed it. And the leader of the opposition at the moment, if they came to power, he was an architect of the equal shared parental responsibility presumption. However, it will be very hard to wind it back. I've read the submissions or most of the submissions that were made to the Australian Law Reform Commission. And my word, people have suffered under this regime. Children have suffered under this regime of this sort of equal time, equal shared parental responsibility. So I think that this legislation going forward will ultimately reduce the number of applications to the court. I have never seen in previous to these 17 years so many applications to the court about time. People mostly worked it out, but where there was a presumption of 50-50 care, then the court had to look at that. So you had people saying, if I don't get 50% time with the child, it's because I'm not good enough. It's saying something about me. So they would fight tooth and nail. And one of the submissions boldly said, sometimes people are wanting equal time with the children purely for financial reasons, or maybe mainly for financial reasons, so that they paid less child support and the other person didn't get a bigger share of the property pool because of the children. So it's been awful, actually, the way that people have become entitled to 50-50 without thinking about the kids. It was about fairness to the parents. I think so anyway. And now that should be gone. But it'll take a while for this information to filter down. I mean, it's really still the lawyers that we're still kind of having to say, by the way, have you looked at the new act?
Yeah.
You know, we're sort of sending this out to people to the lawyers going, pull your head in.
That comes to another question. Does time spent with correlate with responsibility now? So moving forward, say the judge gives, I don't know, weekends to one parent and the other parent does weeks. Like this is just random.
Yeah,
that's obviously not going to happen because that's a bit weird. But one parent gets the week, one parent gets the weekends. Obviously, the parent that's got the kids during the week probably is going to be needing to make more of the decisions. Is the judge more likely to give the parent that has more time the responsibility as well? Or if they don't fight, it's just going to be...
I'm just crystal ball gazing here, Laura, but I don't think that they're going to tie the joint decision-making to the time with the children. Okay. It used to be, that was the presumption of the old legislation. Now they're saying, and I think what will happen is that people, in the absence of any disentitling behaviour, will continue to have the same parental responsibility that they've always had, and the court, they don't have to provide for a change to that, okay? So it just remains the same, and that doesn't matter where the kids spend most of their time or not. But with the caveat, Laura, of course, that day-to-day stuff, if you've got them, the person who's got them during the week probably gets more decision-making on a day-to-day basis.
Look, and there's a thing called decision fatigue. So, look, in the entrepreneur world, they say try and limit your decision-making by preparing your outfit the day before, or Steve Jobs just wore the same outfit every day, and that apparently helps you. Imagine all the decisions you wouldn't have to make. So there's a plus side to it. But Mum, who, listening today, might need to consider going for sole parental responsibility? Who are the type of people listening? Describe situations and examples. Who should be going for it? And then I'm going to ask you, how should they go for it in court?
The people who should go for sole parental responsibility on an issue, the people who believe that the other person's input or lack of it is to the detriment of the kids.
Right. That's the sole answer. Okay. So in normal people speak, Mum, you're saying if your ex is a poopy bum.
Oh, I see. Is that one word or two?
If your ex is, I don't want to swear, but if your ex is so painful that, I don't know, your kid getting missed signing up to things, or your kid is needing medical help and they can't get it because you keep fighting, or you like that description where you said their kid was going to 2 schools, or that your child is going to miss out on something, or the parenting is being hampered because you guys can't agree. That's the kind of people that need to go for this.
Well, and you do, and you go before a court who will then look at your actions. And in the example of the people in a country town sending these kids to 2 different schools, the court, I remember...
They're both as naughty as each other.
The judge was absolutely livid with them. And honestly, if there'd been a magic pop-up parent, I think the judge would have let the children live with them. But there wasn't anybody. Yeah. So, yes, your conduct has to be child-focused and putting their interests first.
What can people do? So say one of our listeners today has got a high conflict and they fight about everything and they're like, this is really hard to raise a child through this. I need sole parental. Or they've got a manipulative, controlling person who's every time they've got to make a decision is saying, I'll agree, but you have to do this for me. And that's getting in the way. Or they've got an avoidant who every time they try and get them to agree to something, they just disappear or won't answer. What kind of things do they need to show the judge or the court or the mediator to help get this across the line?
All of the emails. If you're in Our Children, using all of that in writing.
So when you say in Our Children, just so listeners know, that is a parenting communication app. So you're saying any kind of parenting communication that you do.
Might show it. Because I don't think the other person doesn't always realise that they are so transparent when they do things. But but the tone of all of the letters or emails put together just show someone who usually is a bit of a smart aleck, who wants to be in control of everything and is not child focused. So you put those to the court and they'll go, oh my goodness, well, I have to pick a parent because I'm going to give sole parental responsibility to someone on this issue.
Wow. Okay. And so is it usually just issues, or do they sometimes just go blanket, give them every decision?
Oh, yes, sometimes they will go blanket. I think you asked me if there were going to be as many cases in court going forward. I think parents who knew their ex was awful couldn't agree to the children going half the time there and half the time with them, right? And so they would have to fight. And it was perfect storm. The people who were manipulative and controlling, they wanted to get 50-50. And the people who didn't want the 50-50 because they had been manipulated and controlled couldn't agree. And I think that's how the courts got clogged up with these cases. I think decision-making about children was never very hotly contested, really. And in fact, in the old days, guardianship, I used to say, look, unless your ex is an axe murderer, I think the court's going to leave it joint. So I think if there's a dispute on an issue, I think the court will probably limit their sole parental responsibility to that one issue, and then you'll keep your joint parental responsibility or, no orders about parental responsibility for long term. I'm just crystal ball gazing, but I think that's how they're going to do it.
So anyone listening who's currently in court or they're with a lawyer, what should they be pointing to? Because like you've just said, you're still educating lawyers at the moment, and there are lawyers out there that just are completely oblivious to some of these changes. What should our listeners say to their lawyers or their ex, even if to point this new issue out and that, hey, look, I think I really need some sort of sole responsibility for this issue all over. What should they be pointing them to?
Or we're going to be in deadlock and one of us has had to go to court anyway. To be fair to everybody, I mean, not everyone has the luxury as I do of delving into things pretty hard and seeing stuff as it pops up.
Hang on, are you just saying not every lawyer is as good as you or as across it as you because you've got more time on your hands these days?
That's right. That's right. I eat, sleep and breathe the Family Law Act
but you're
and our members.
obsessed with the Family Law Act, Mum. So I think you're a special breed of human. But yes, okay.
And I don't think that there was as much education around as there was when the 2006 changes came in. So I think just without offending your lawyer, just ask them, how does Section 61 DAA or DAB affect the orders we're seeking? Because you need to change, if you're in court, your orders need to change to parenting responsibility. They need, instead of an equal shared parental responsibility is not a thing. So your orders will have to be changed. So I think ask your lawyer how your orders should be changed to reflect the changes in the 6th of May. Of this year, and then just listen to see how they respond.
Okay, because there are people who are sending in consent orders because lawyers have these templates, right? And they're getting rejected because they've got the old wording. So there are lawyers that aren't across it yet. And you guys who are listening, you are across it because we're lucky we've got Mum. But yeah, so be mindful of that. Now, Mum, my next question then is, what about those people who have interim orders or already have orders and they're living the nightmare? What do they do?
Two separate. It's one question, but it's probably two separate answers.
Okay, so let's do interim. So those people that are technically they haven't had their big trial yet, but they've got these temporary orders in place and they're struggling because their ex is a pain in the butt and they're still struggling with this decision making. What can they do?
Well, your final orders would probably ask for sole parental responsibility, at least in the areas where you can demonstrate there's conflict, or if you really think there's going to be conflict in everything, ask for sole parental responsibility. You have to change your orders anyway, so put that in and give that. Then the court can make a decision on a final basis about what goes where. It's probably not worth making an interim application to get sole parental responsibility about something unless it's urgent. Is it surgery? Is it an emergency trip somewhere? Or,
is it school's about to start?
Yeah, that's right. So
okay.
Otherwise, leave that till the end. And then on the final hearing, the court will see it all and apply the old law, the new law.
So new law. So what about those people who are listening, who are suffering from post-separation abuse? That's why they're still listening to us, the poor sausages. And big hugs to you if you're listening. Yep. What about those guys? And their orders have the old wording. Can they apply the new wording to their old orders?
No, I'm afraid not. The old orders stand, and the court is aware that a lot of people would have wished they'd litigated under the new laws, not the old laws, but they have an overriding assumption that children's interests are best served by not having ongoing litigation. And I think the case for you to look at is Rice and Asplund, and I've done a little video on it, and I read out what the judge said. And they said, left to their own devices, people would argue about these things forever. And so they have to stop it somewhere. So I'm very sorry, unless there's a big change, unless there's a real change in circumstances, and there are cases that show how the court looks at that. Otherwise, they're going to be flooded by applications. And so they've just had to sort of draw the line.
And Mum, you've dropped a bit of an Easter egg there, and we've told our members already, but you've been recording cases, so little mini case episodes, and we have created a Patreon account, and we're going to be letting our Patreon subscribers and members have access to these little case videos where you talk through different cases. So if you're going through court, or you just want to feel a little bit more confident by maybe finding a case that relates to your situation and seeing what a judge or a full court or appeals court says about it, it does make you feel a little bit better knowing other people have gone through it and this is what happened to them. And Mum is doing a great busy work getting through, doing some really great cases, and she's going to be continuing that. So if you are interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can find us on Patreon. I have no idea how, but I think we're called the Divorce Course Podcast, and
it's getting there.
Figure that out. But yes, but we're on there. There's already a freebie on there for members. So if you're interested, come along.
And also what I do is for people who want to do a deep dive into something, I put one or two more recent cases about that issue, and I'm also putting the sections of the Act. So it's
like a little mini law school now.
It is. Well, you're almost students.
So you can watch the video, or it will also be on Spotify. And I think I can figure it out, that turns it into an extra episode, mini episodes you can listen to through Spotify, or you can watch the video on Patreon. So let us know if you're interested in that. You can go and become a member. Or if we've given you some value and you want to say thanks, then go and become a Patreon member and then buy Mum a cup of tea, basically. But Mum, we digress. I want you to just maybe highlight to anybody who is listening to this parental responsibility episode, because maybe they're looking to go for it. I think there's a warning that needs to be said here about being careful, because they might not choose you. So what do you want to say to our members about that? Because you might think, yes, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to take them to court and I'm going to become the decision maker. But there is a chance, isn't there, that you could lose your ability to make those decisions. So you've got to be careful. So what do you say about that as just a little warning?
And anything can happen in court. You could find yourself having paid money if you're paying lawyers to get a change to the orders and it's unsuccessful. And then you're not only up to your fees, but in a really bad situation, you may have to pay the other person's legal fees. However, with children's matters, if there's genuine concern, it's not often a court will make you pay the other person's fees, because people should, the Act says, but by and large, pay their own legal fees. Just be careful, get some legal advice, independent legal advice. You can, read all the cases and things like that. And I know that our listeners are absolutely good at what they do. And it's not that hard to read a case and get the gist of it. But there is a reason why the degree for law is 4 years. And there's a reason why older, more experienced lawyers I get paid more, I guess. Well, they're good. They are, because they've got all of those years of experience. So it's like you wouldn't read a medical book on taking your appendix out and then do that without getting a surgeon to look at it. And so you might be able to run the case yourself, but you need someone to tell you whether you're on the right track, or have you made a mistake, or is there, and the big thing, Laura, is judges have a lot of discretion. And so they do have to put the children's interests first, but they might not interpret it the way that you do. So just get someone to look it over and see if you're the one who's being a little bit unreasonable, or if there's a risk that you might get found to be unreasonable.
Because you got to be careful what you wish for. If you want to do that and then you walk in there and the judge is having a bad day, or your affidavit's not that great, or the other side has made up all this stuff and they believe them, then you're at risk. So you make sure you're making solid decisions and you've got a solid ground and you've seen a lawyer and you know. Again, if you can't see a lawyer, you can go to Community Legal. We've got a How to Use Free Legal Services episode that you can listen to. I'll put that in the show notes as well. But, Mum, I think when it comes to this parental responsibility, I think we'll have to do an episode when one of the cases comes out.
Yes.
And you will also do your little mini episode explaining it in detail, in your nerd law detail. But I think for everybody listening, I think this is a positive. It's going to take a little bit of reaching into your life and interfering. You can 61 dab them away. I'm never going to forget that now, dab. Because, it's none of their business what you do day to day. And I think that's such a good change. And I'm really hoping that for anyone listening, that's going to give them some, from our old listeners who've already got their orders, I am sorry. But for the new listeners, I'm happy for you guys.
Well, but Laura and listeners, so 61 dab says in the note, this will mean the person usually does not consult about what they touch. That's always been the law. So if you've got old orders and even if you've got equal shared parental responsibility, when the kids are with you, you do not have to consult them about what they eat or wear usually, because they're not usually long-term issues. So what the court has done in this section is said, just at the bottom bit, it says, even though there might be joint or equal shared parental or joint parental responsibility when the kids are in your day-to-day care, these are the sort of things that are day-to-day issues. And you can just send this 61 dab even to the ones who are operating under your old order. Okay.
Right. So 61 dab is happiness for everyone.
It is.
A little bit of a breather for those with narcissistic types, manipulative, controlling, or high conflict. You can 61 dab them out the door.
That's right.
And
I could only see you doing your dabbing. You're so cute.
I'm doing so much dabbing today. And if you are thinking about going and getting that responsibility because your ex is a pain in the butt, just be aware you need to be showing that you're the reasonable one. So you're going to have to do the hard yards. You can't just go, they're narcissists. Your Honor, they're a narcissist. And the judge is going to go, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Then you just don't even mention the word unless they're clinically diagnosed. You're going to have to say, look, Judge, look at how many times I'm asked and the compromising I was willing to do, and, be the most reasonable you can be.
And sometimes if one person's being reasonable and really trying to compromise and the other person isn't, the other person may be exercising coercive control by not getting getting into the spirit of it and reaching agreement. And the court's more aware of that sort of thing as well. So,
in saying
I think it's good.
If you've got really firm beliefs about, I don't know, a medical thing or something like that, and you can't really negotiate it, just as long as you write back and say, no, I disagree because here are my reasons. The doctor said so. That doesn't mean you should compromise with your ex over what a doctor would tell you. But, you can put that in a letter and be reasonable. But go and see a lawyer. Go listen to our other episodes on co-parenting with a narcissist. And thank you, Mum, for explaining that. And when the new cases of this type, when the new cases come out, we will definitely do a follow-up episode so people can listen. Thank you, Mum.
I'll have a look because the last lot of cases I've seen were only late April, I think. So because it takes a little while for them to get published.
Yeah. Well,
anonymously.
Thank you so much for your time, Mum. I hope we haven't broken everybody's brains talking about this, but I think it's an important topic if you've got kids, because it is a big issue that will be approached, whether you like it or not, if you go to court or even in mediation.
Because if you have a property settlement, it's done and dusted, right? But kids, it goes on and on and on until they're, over 18 usually. So yes, this is very relevant to
be fair, Mum, you're still parenting me and I'm 40-something, so.
I don't think I am.
You are. You are. I still call you all the time. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you all the best. Have a lovely week. Thank you, Mum.
Okay. Love everyone. Bye-bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.